Hey folks, a buzzword that's captured the attention of many people around the world in recent years is woke. And woke is a word I'm sure that you're tired of hearing because I certainly am. Every time you turn around, there seems to be a new argument about whether or not something is woke. And so I thought I'd make this video because the arguments around this topic actually relate to my experience as a South African. Because I'm going to show you that South Africa, at least in its post-apartheid incarnation, has always been woke. And that is one of the chief reasons why this country is in such a sorry state. Now, the reason I say that post-apartheid South Africa has always been woke is that I was born in 1990, which means that I grew up in the immediate post-apartheid South Africa. And as a child in school, particularly when it came to my historical education, all that was really drummed into me was how the apartheid regime oppressed black South Africans and all the terrible things that people who share my skin color did to other people. I was not taught about all the atrocities committed against black South Africans by other black South Africans. That was knowingly left out of my government education, which I now see was done for obvious reasons. But what I want to point out is that this wokeness, as it's now known, which I will define as an unnecessary or unhealthy obsession with race, gender, and sexuality, is nothing new, especially not in South Africa. The tenets of South Africa's post-1994 democracy are built, supposedly, on the values of fairness, equality, and non-racialism. But in practice, the society in which I live is none of those things. What we now live in is essentially a feudal state where a tiny political elite, mostly black, but not all, rule over the majority with an iron fist, basically do whatever they choose, steal however much money they can get their hands on, and we, as the average folks on the bottom, can do nothing about it. And as soon as anyone does, whether they are white, black, or anything in between, they're either called a racist, in the case of white people, or a counter-revolutionary, in the case of educated black people who object to the suffering of their people at the hands of supposed liberators. Because you see, regardless of the fact that the ruling elite of South Africa is now majority black, politicians still frame themselves as oppressed revolutionaries fighting against a great evil. And this is the kind of narrative that they run on through every election. And it served them well, but it's finally gotten to the point where it's wearing thin, and the next national election is no longer a sure thing for the African National Congress, our ruling party, because they are so inept, so greedy, and so corrupt that even the most uneducated voter is starting to realize that something is seriously wrong. Now, it took much longer than I believe it should have for people to realize what was happening to this country, but the tide is starting to turn. And I think that is largely because the problems in South Africa are now essentially impossible to ignore. Almost all of our government-run institutions, from our power provider, Eskom, to our National Postal Service, are either entirely bankrupt or on the verge of bankruptcy and are barely functional. So this is not the kind of thing that the ANC government can make disappear simply by calling people racists or sellouts to the cause. We have problems on a daily basis in South Africa that affect everyone more or less equally, except for the political elite who loot state coffers for their own benefit with no regard to the future or the damage they cause. So the main point I'm trying to make here is that if you look at South Africa from a Western perspective, we are your canary in the coal mine. South Africa is what happens if you allow the underlying principles of the movement, now referred to as wokeness, to fully infect your society. And I would advise you, if you're living in a country that has not yet fully gone woke, and you see that starting to happen as it has around the world, my advice is do whatever the hell you can to stop it. Because if you stay quiet and you stand by and do nothing and just watch it happen, you will soon suffer like I and many other South Africans, regardless of race, suffer. Look after yourselves, and for now, farewell.